Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. Ahead of the Australian Grand Prix, a big news day with a rumoured Mercedes B team potentially emerging into the sport for 2026, with Aston Martin looking to move away from Mercedes powertrains potentially, but also Toto Wolff has given his thoughts on the way that Mercedes have been developing behind the scenes over the last few weeks, saying it's very promising, the returns they are presently seeing on their development. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. Before we talk about this, wanted to mention from Andreas Haupt here, talks about the fact that the grid boxes in Melbourne have been widened by 20 centimeters. This hopefully will bring to an end in part the difficulties that Ocon in Bahrain and Alonso in Saudi Arabia, and there was even other drivers in addition to Alonso further back than him that didn't get penalised for some reason, but Alonso was. So they've widened the boxes. That should mean it's easier to actually get the cars inside them, and hopefully no more kind of misaligned starting position penalties this season, because sitting in these cars is tricky to see anything really with how wide they are and how low the drivers sit nowadays, and just how big and bulky the cars are in general. So that's one change for this weekend that hopefully will fix things. You guys can see Alonso here way out of the box, but also drivers further back in a similar boat weren't penalised. But this is one of the key stories of the day, the potential of a high-tech team entering Formula 1 in 2026. This actually comes out of Dieter Renken, a very reputable journalist in the Formula 1 space for many years. So if he's saying this, it's likely to have some validity. So High-Tech is building up an F1 team. We know Andretti want to get involved. There was a new project the other day called Formula Equal, which apparently is Saudi-backed, wanting to get involved as well. And rumours are circulating that sources have suggested that they are using High-Tech, a former Mercedes facility at Silverstone, currently being used by their applied science engineering division, to potentially start to develop some ideas. This comes in parts because relationships between Toto Wolff and Aston owner Lawrence Stroll have soured to some degree, a situation not aided by the green team's current form using the same powertrain. I imagine part of this is because we saw just yesterday that Aston Martin's rear axle, they buy the rear suspension and gearbox from Mercedes, is actually hindering their peak performance compared to what Red Bull are capable of. And obviously they're doing more with the Mercedes powertrain than Mercedes are right now. So, Lawrence Stroll probably thinks of himself, and understandably so, as one of the big dick swingers now in the sport, right? He's up there right at the front fighting for race wins, more so than Mercedes and Ferrari are at the moment. Whether that's sustainable over the next few years, we'll see. Hopefully it is. But of course, Aston Martin, they don't want to be a customer team anymore to Mercedes. I imagine they want to be their own team. Where they get their engines from remains to be seen, because I don't think they'd be able to really make their own engines. Okay, maybe they have that facility in their factory that they've just built, but they might not want to do that. But still, reining back their kind of, association with Mercedes is probably what will be happening in the future, given their current development. And they've kind of been that Silverstone Aston Martin team, the Mercedes B team of sorts. It's not really been, okay, Williams are a customer team, McLaren are a customer team, but Aston Martin have been maybe the closest to kind of the Mercedes B team as it's been. But, that maybe is not going to be the case in the future, and certainly they're not at the present time. So there might be an alternative in play. So codenamed H26, there has been significant progress going on behind the scenes that is now being leaked to the public, it seems, that in the next few months they are going to put an application into place to apply for the 2026 regulations, and a new team could arrive. So, look, there's a lot of interest from all across the world right now in terms of getting involved for 2026, but High-Tech, it seems, are making serious progress here and are developing a partnership with Mercedes for their powertrains and other elements to allow that to occur going forward. So, could potentially mean a bit of a split between Aston Martin and Mercedes. I'm sure the two of these guys still get on, but I'm sure, it's just business at the end of the day. I know they were like hugging it out and having a good chat with each other multiple times over the course of the Bahrain Grand Prix weekends. But Lawrence Stroll is probably entitled to think now that his team is in somewhat a better position than just to be a Mercedes customer going forward. Audi have also said they won't be supplying. It's not in their current plans to speak to customer teams. So, of course, Audi are making their own engines with Sauber going into 2026. For now, they haven't really had any relationships yet with other teams to potentially supply their power units. But there has been some questions as to whether Williams or McLaren or even Aston Martin might move away from Mercedes powertrains, and Mercedes, I guess, have got some ideas in the works with High-Tech to maintain that going forwards. Now, speaking of Mercedes, they've given some thoughts on their upgrades they're working on. They won't be arriving this weekend in Australia. There is a couple of new things Mercedes might bring this weekend. Apparently, Red Bull are also bringing a couple of small upgrades before a big Red Bull upgrade arrives in Baku, which is pretty scary if that actually makes their car even better than it already is. But Toto Wolff has kind of done his pre-race analysis here, and Toto Wolff loves using words like this. We're going to try and maximize the car we've got. Been saying this for the last couple of years to no halt, really. There's basically just one statement here, which is actually interesting, I thought. But this is what he had to say. The progress we saw in Saudi was encouraging. We maximized the package and scored some solid points. More importantly, we continue to learn and feed into our development direction. Everyone back at the factory at base has been working hard to kind of turn these learnings into performance. The signs we are seeing back at the factory are promising. So these were the words that he was giving even in Bahrain a little bit, but certainly in Saudi Arabia about 2 weeks ago, that ever since after Bahrain, they'd changed their mind. And we know from Andrew Chauvelin just yesterday, we talked about it, that they knew even before Bahrain, weeks before Bahrain, that this car wasn't really going to cut it, because I guess they'd made some mistakes in the wind tunnel and they knew that what they'd actually delivered wasn't really where it needed to be. They knew for some time that it needed changing. So in Saudi Arabia, they'd already seen changes in the kind of simulator and wind tunnel performance they were getting back at base, and that has seemingly continued. So if Toto Wolff was less kind of optimistic now as he was 2 weeks ago, then it would potentially show that what they developed behind the scenes a couple of weeks ago between Bahrain and Saudi was impressive, but then that kind of development had fallen off. But he's still saying, as of today, really, that it's still promising, the development they are seeing. Now, of course, bringing that to the track and actually creating updates for the W14 that work in the cost cap era, where they can't just completely renovate the car and bring a new chassis, which I think they're going to have to leave the chassis change to next year, but everything else they can probably change. But he does admit whatever they're bringing in development relatively soon, okay, they're going to bring a couple of small things here and probably a couple of small things to Baku, and then the big upgrade might well arrive in Imola, which might be based on what he's talking about here. So that's when they expect to make a big step forwards, but of course a lot of other teams also bringing upgrades around about that time as well. So he says, look, the competitive order behind Red Bull is tight. There are small margins having an effect on points scored. So obviously getting up to Red Bull is the goal, but for now it's about becoming the second fastest car, and it's showing Aston Martin and Ferrari that Mercedes are still up top and actually going to be a contender team when they can find a way, if they can find a way to actually close the gap to Red Bull at some point or another. So they're going to look to maximize their car, all this type of stuff. But it was the thoughts from Toto Wolff that it's promising what he's seeing behind the scenes right now that is giving Mercedes some optimism, because the initial quote he had 2 weeks ago was basically like they're seeing more gains behind the scenes than they've seen in years, pretty much. And I guess based on his comments today, he reckons that development is still continuing. So promising signs at the factory. What that means in the near future, difficult to say, but Mercedes' short-term objective, well, beat Ferrari consistently and then catch up and overtake Aston Martin at some point or another. I know that a couple of weeks ago we discussed Mike Elliott, right? Because after it was clear the guys had got it wrong, there was rumours that the tensions between Mike Elliott, the technical director at Mercedes, and Toto Wolff had become somewhat more fractious, let's say, and you can understand why. Now, of course, some people, it seems, that made mistakes in the wind tunnel have now been fired as a result, but Nico Rosberg, who worked with Mike Elliott and was at Mercedes for some time, says Mike Elliott is extremely competent. He was the one who brought Mercedes aerodynamics into shape in my time and made the department the best in Formula 1 after the years 2010 to 2013 of Red Bull dominance. So, pretty high praise from Nico Rosberg, saying that Mike Elliott here is definitely not the problem from his perspective. So I guess, one of the reasons why Mike Elliott is still where he is for now, and if he can oversee a return to form to at least some degree for Mercedes, then I'm sure they'll have some confidence going into next year. But they had the same confidence last year, and it didn't work out so well with the development of the W14. The final thing I wanted to mention for you guys is about Adrian Newey. Everyone's talking about Newey lately because he and his team have obviously nailed the design of the RB19 and the new era of cars, the ground effect that Newey was famous for ages ago, decades ago now, and has created so many championship winning cars. Now, Red Bull have pulled a bit of a fast one really in terms of how they employ Newey, because he is technically, despite being their chief technical guy, he's a consultant via his own company. Now, this excludes him from the cost cap, and there was some drama last season when they were reviewing the cost cap in 2021 that the FIA were like, hang on a second here, guys, you employ this guy, but yet you're not really counting his salary as part of the cost cap, because I believe the highest earning 3 individuals at the company don't have to count towards the cap. But Adrian Newey would have been included in those 3, but because he's a contractor, Red Bull managed to kind of make it not count. So anyway, his contract is now expiring very shortly. Whether they can renew this, or whether Newey, or there's something else going on there, is a bit of a question mark, because as we say, he's exempt from the cap really because he's part of his own company, and it's been noted that maybe that won't be allowed to happen anymore. So Red Bull and Newey will either find a way through this. I know that in the past, Ferrari and even Mercedes, I think, have definitely offered Newey Newey to like please come and help us, but Newey's declined. He wants to stay at Red Bull. But if the money becomes a bit of a problem there, if they can't pay him as much as he, deserves or as much as he wants based on the cost cap issues that they might run into, then maybe there's a world in which something happens here. People were looking into this actually and finding that there's this company number here. This is all public information, but Racing Services Limited, of which Adrian Newey is a director and design engineer for the company, and he is hired as effectively a contractor for Red Bull, so a bit of a cheeky way for them to get around the cap, but they may not be able to do that going forward, which does raise some questions as to whether he's going to be at Red Bull still long term. I think the guy's 64 or so now, so he might be easing up on retirement age, but he loves making quick cars, and that's what he's done over the last several decades, and he's still doing it today. So very much interested your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.